Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hello, everybody. Welcome in, Rob, Dior. Hey, get yourselves comfy cozy in that pillow and blanket fort over there. Sorry, I'm running a little late today. I was messing around to see if I could get the camera and the green screen working together, and the lighting in this place is still not really conducive to making that happen. So, um, we'll see. We'll see. Someday in the future, I would like to be able to be on camera again and not have to spend time every 10 or 15 minutes changing settings. But welcome in. If you can hear the sound of my voice, you are tuned in to Grandma's Games Lab. Woot 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 woot. This is not Grandma Plays a Game Today. This is Grandma's Games Lab, which is our Patreon project that we've been doing for several months now, where we are running podcast episodes. And they are also live on the Patreon channel, so you can head over there uh, and watch. Nobody's been really participating question wise there, so I probably should keep that open regardless. What was my reopen close tab? There we go. Just pin that. We'll pin that over there. There you go, darling. All right, but welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. This is not the same content that you are used to Monday through Friday. I normally do this Patreon stream as a live YouTube. But let me tell you, that is not where people are used to finding me, and that's not where they go to find me. Certainly not for a live event. So I thought I would shift gears and try something a little different and run the Patreon through Twitch. And then I can upload it to YouTube the same way I do all of my daily Twitch streams. And we'll see if we can't get a few more grandkids to come in and participate with the discussion on the show. So that's my hope. Eventually, I would like to have guest speakers and other folks to come join and have discussions with, but we're not quite there. It's been a rough couple of months for the old grandma, and we're not quite at that stage yet, but we will be. I have plans and goals. So what we are doing today is we alternate in the Patreon productions between a discussion day where we talk about brain stuff and psychology stuff and the material and apparatuses that surround games and gaming. And then on the alternating weeks, we have game demos. So we've looked at the origins of games and gaming, how they likely, hypothetically, likely, maybe, um, helped early humans from the beginning of history. We walked through the earliest records of games and did a demo of the Royal Game of Ur, one of the first intact games found. Dr. Irving Finkel was able to decipher instructions from an ancient tablet, and after years, decades of study and having this game found in multiple dig sites archaeologically, Dr. Finkel was finally reading and deciphering material that matched up to this particular game specifically. So we did a demo on Royal Game of Ur. These are all up on the YouTube channel. There is a playlist on YouTube called Grandma's Games Lab Patreon, and there's also a tab you can click on for live. But I'm thinking that we'll just keep putting them in the playlist because I don't know that live production on YouTube is going to be something I can manage. I know how to run things through Twitch. I know how to have my OBS set up and everything like that. And trying to do YouTube as well is just more than I want to really take on. I did my experiment. We tried it. It was unproductive as far as bringing in conversation or viewers or any interest in the Patreon at all. So, yeah, we'll just load these up there after the fact, and folks who want to take a look at their own pace and in their own time can grab the shows there. But today, that's right. I was going through what we have already done. And what we have already done is, um, let me grab my playlist. And I can tell you, playlist. Grandma's Games Lab. So we did Royal Game of We talked about backgammon, cribbage, how brains learn, more cribbage. We talked about gambling and the origins of gambling and games being very connected. Then we looked at the game of Farkle and talked about risk and reward. Most recently, we talked about what even is a game. What are the components that make up a game? And we did an episode on surreal games. And that's games inspired by real world events, where I actually showed a video game, This War of Mine, and talked about my personal connection to the history that inspired the game This War of Mine from 11-Bit Studios. Highly recommend it. And then we did an episode that demoed Pinochle, one of my all-time favorite games. And that's where we are now. We're back to talking about the brain side of things. So, yep, we've got another slideshow set up, and it might be a little bit boring. I hope not. I really hope it's not boring. I will try to avoid that to the best of my ability, but it is a slideshow. So we need to talk about not just games, no dice, no nothing, just role playing. And where can we trace the roots and origins of role playing? What do we imagine would be the first evidence that Homo sapiens sapien imagined themselves to be something else? It's not easy to trace in a historical record, because dreaming, I think, would be a certain evidence of brain activity that represented people in circumstances that were imagined and not real. So I might hypothesize that dreams would be an original awareness that we were capable of maybe being something else. I think theater very certainly gives us an awareness of what humans were doing to pretend. And so we'll also be looking at tabletop roleplay games. I won't be going through too many specific game things today. We're really going to talk about the brain side of stuff. But I sometimes, when I was playing D&D, would think, gosh, if I were in Greek theater back in the day, this would be exactly the kind of thing that I would do to tell a story. We'd have a loose general structure and then have a certain way of randomizing the events and allow the actors to create the stories. And as we've seen from groups of actors, be they camera and stage actors or voice actors, we've seen a lot of people who are absolutely amazing at improvisational storytelling as long as they're able to do it in a group. You don't want to have to improvisationally create a novel. That's really not great. It's a Herculean task. Um, which brings up another point that a lot of the Greek theater, there were myths and stories they could play from. So there were many characters who were already present, and we will talk about that today as well, the difference between characters and roles. And then first we'll look at brain structure, we'll look at characters and roles, and we'll close up by talking about what is real. When we talk about suspension of disbelief and game immersion or film immersion, we're talking about being subtracted from reality and mentally, emotionally launched into an imagined space. And it might explain why the film industry has been one of the highest grossing industries in the history of humankind. And why we focus so much time on play and roles and things like that. But let's go to the demo lab and allow me to show you what we're looking at here on Grandma's Games Lab. Games, brains, and roleplay. Let's look at role-playing and the brain. When we talk about role-playing, we need to look at what allows us to be creative. Why are we doing this and our dogs aren't? Your cat isn't. Chances are really good the bird out on the fence in your front yard is not pretending there's something else. Why do we do this? Well, we got the prefrontal cortex. Now, there are other animals that have prefrontal cortices. I'm not getting into that today. We might look at that in a future episode. We might have, I don't know, we might have an expert stop by and go, hey, I can fill in the gaps on this. Come on, Hank Green. We need you. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain. This is directly quoted from the article cited at the bottom of the page, and that will be you will have citations on every page where I am quoting, and this whole slideshow is basically quotes directly from articles that I've been researching for the past month. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that handles higher cognitive activity. This is a part of your brain, I'm going to pause and insert, a part of your brain that develops around puberty. So it will begin in that 9, 10, 11 years old stage on average. Your mileage may vary in human development, and that will continue to develop until full adulthood is reached somewhere around 25, age 25. And it's assumed that by age 36, your body and brain have reached max capacity and development, and now everything else is just about gains. So all the material that you're pretty much gonna get is present by 36. Not to say that you can't change the shape of things, as you can see, as people will change their bodies and go for advanced education later in life. But the actual physicality of your structures are set in place. Prefrontal cortex is important in that pubescent development because, as we're reading here, it handles higher cognitive activity such as making decisions and solving problems. Relatively recent research shows a link. Now, keeping in mind this is, let me get my date on this article. Why do I not have a date on that article? Updated April 5th, 2025. So, as of the most recent research in 2025, the prefrontal cortex is connected to creativity. In addition, a part of the prefrontal cortex called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, VMPFC, for not much shorter, thank you, is charged with regulating emotions and self-reflection, both of which spur the creative process. So when you want to know why a 2 or 3-year-old cannot regulate their own emotions, well, they're not exactly capable. It's kind of like asking a 2 or 3-year-old to have a volume modification on their voice. It's just they don't get it. Their hearing is still developing. So, good morning, Wolfie Kohaku. Okay, I hope you get lots of good work done this morning. And this is all just going to be chit chat. The read along is just the slides anyway. I'm going to be reading out the slides regardless. So this is where we're going. We're looking at the brain regions that are affecting creativity and imagination so that we can understand why we role play. What is the point? Why bother? Why do we want to do it? Why does it fill us up with things? So keeping in mind that the making decisions and solving problems become a much bigger requirement for young humans in that pubescent phase, because that is where they are developing the parts of the brain that help them to understand where they exist in a social structure. So, where are you in a family unit? What belonging groups do you have? And what kind of status do you have in those belonging groups based on the achievement you receive? What are you rewarded for in those groups? Do you have added safety? Do you get accolades for particular skills and talents? And you can begin to see where you are in a hierarchy of roles, and we'll get more into roles as we go. Another area that we want to look at for creativity and imagination is the limbic system. I tried to get visuals of all of these for you earlier, but it starts to become a barrier to entry to doing the episode at all, as we've discovered over the last few weeks. So you can look these up on your own. Prefrontal cortex limbic system. It's a collection of brain structures that's located next to the thalamus and underneath the cerebral cortex. So when you imagine the big fatty portion of the brain that you see immediately whenever you see a drawing or imagery of the brain, this is the little bit that sits underneath. If you hold one of your hands up, palm down, with your fingers curved over in a gentle curve, and then put the other hand underneath that curved hand, that's in between your two hands is where your limbic system is. That's the collection of brain structures located next to the thalamus and underneath the cerebral cortex. These structures help to control our emotions and our motivations. These are going to be two very important words when it comes to role play. The hippocampus and amygdala, both parts of this system, are especially relevant to creativity and imagination. The hippocampus is charged with storing and retrieving memories, and the amygdala is responsible for processing emotions. In conjunction, these two parts of the brain help to form ideas. The amygdala is fascinating in brain structure. It is one of the only sections of the brain that has direct access to your olfactory sense. If I understand what I have read correctly and the science has not been changed by additional experimentation and research and study, then as I understand it, your sense of smell heads straight into the amygdala, which is why you'll smell a cologne, or maybe it's pumpkin spice, and that draws up memories immediately. So emotion and memory are intertwined in the brain. The hippocampus and the amygdala are dancing their tango and storing memories. We'll look at this as well later, that having strong emotions when creating memory can have a huge impact on your ability to determine if that memory is from a real or imagined event. Congrats on your streak, Wolfie. So, these two parts of the brain help us to form ideas because they get connected. Sometimes you might smell something that's connected to an emotion of fear. And whether or not you're in any danger, having that scent hit your olfactory sense will trigger an emotional response. Brains are fascinating. Okay, the parietal and occipital lobes. Prefrontal cortex up in the front, right behind your forehead. Then your limbic system. Now we're going to look at parietal and occipital lobes. They're on the sides and back. When you imagine what something or someone might look like, even if you've never seen it or them, that's your parietal and occipital lobes at work. These two parts of the brain are responsible for spatial orientation and visual processing. It is also widely believed that mental images and ideas are formed in these two areas. This is what's going to track back to how fascinating it is that humans can learn practical things from written experiences. Someone else documents their experience doing a thing. They don't even need to include a picture, so long as they include a description containing words that you can decode and create an image for yourself. So when you think about the earliest explorers and descriptions that they would often send back to their home countries of things, why so many of those images created ended up looking nothing like the animals they were meant to represent. The earliest images of elephants by Europeans and things like that. The idea that there were dragons, the idea that there were sea monsters, and granted, there's lots of things in the oceans that we don't know about because they're better at hiding from us than we are at discovering them. But our ability to take a description of something and create a mental image of it is rooted in the parietal and occipital lobes. all of this brings us to this space right here: neuroplasticity and creativity. How stretchy is your brain? And how that affects your ability to be a creative person. So the article goes on to say, according to the tenets of psychology, creativity comes from divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is when we think laterally, which means thinking of various possible outcomes, solutions, or scenarios, not just the most expected one. Now, if you go back to our episode on brains and learning and how brains acquire knowledge, we walked through Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And as you progress along from knowledge to synthesis, up this ladder where each stage builds on the previous stage, lateral thinking is often about comparison. Oh, apples are very much like pears. Apples are shaped very much like oranges, but they're very different. Their skin is different. Their texture inside is different, the meat of the fruit. But they do have similar seeds, and they grow from similar trees in similar ways from a flower that then becomes a fruit. So that ability to compare things one to another is what we mean by lateral thinking. You think about a lateral pass on a football field, whether it's European football or American football, it doesn't matter. A lateral pass is going straight along the horizon to someone on either side of you, not directly forward. So this is what we're talking about with divergent thinking. It's not about homogeneity. It's about being confronted with things that are different so that they challenge you to compare them to things you already know. And this is where you say, if what you already know is the trunk of a tree, and wind and sun and rain and animals challenge these little areas where branches can happen, those branches will begin to grow. And as they grow, more things interact. And then they branch off and they branch off and they branch off. And that's what divergent thinking enables. It's a branching of the what I know into what I don't know. Maybe it's better to put that down as a roots system. Either way, it doesn't matter the top of the when you look at deciduous trees, and the way the top of the tree above ground grows is not significantly different from the way the root structure grows and branches out. Children are experts at divergent thinking because they don't know anything. Children come in with this amazing ability, this flexibility, this semper gumby, where they are capable of learning any language on this planet, and they're capable of conceiving mental images and things that we never would imagine. They're just very, very flexible at putting everything together. They're just playing with their little mental blocks. They don't know what they don't know. And they don't know what is the most likely solution to a given situation because they have no experience. Experience is what allows you to get that pattern recognition. The pattern recognition is what enables you to predict certain outcomes, which is why gambling is so addictive. In addition to the rush of getting a reward, sometimes just taking the risk is part of the reward system, which is what makes gambling so dangerous. Therefore, they must consider all possible solutions. Why is your room a mess? Well, maybe an elephant came in the window and trampled over my stuff, and I was in here trying to clean up, but the elephant flew in through the window and started making a big mess. Because to a child, that's possible. Maybe. That might be the imagination. They don't know what they don't know, so all things are possible. Divergent thinking. Send it off to the side. What's it like? What's it similar to? That's how we develop schemas in the brain. A schema is a place where you plug in new knowledge. So it's kind of like an outlet. Or if you think about those little handheld flat games, often just the size of your palm, that had little metal BBs in them and holes poked in a cardboard image. And the goal was to use physics to try to get all of the little BBs into a hole without dislocating the others that had already settled. A schema is like that little hole that you and new information is like the BB, just going around the toy until it can find a spot to rest and go, ah, yes, I am like these things. This is my tribe. It's the Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the others. Can you see commonalities in things? It's the game Connections. You say day, I say night, you say castle. What? How'd you get to castle? Because you said night. That's lateral thinking. You say castle, I say season. You say, how did you get to season? Because Castle was a TV show and it had several seasons. That game of Connections, if you've never played that version, it's not a board game, it's not a card game, it's nothing. It's just a brain game that you can play with another person. And I'm sure it has many names, but it is incredibly fun to be exposed to how other people think laterally, because that is not something we spend a lot of time doing in our social environments as humans. So there we are. We have the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, the parietal and occipital lobes, and all of those brought together are what enable our neuroplasticity and our creativity as a result of divergent thinking. When we're trying to process things and create structure out of things that are unstructured, it spurs creativity. So connecting all of that to role play, let's look at some narrative roles. This fascinates me. Dominantly because... Actually, let's pop out of this slideshow for just a moment. Let me come here. In some of the earliest roleplay games, this is one of the original first edition D&D character sheets. So when you talk about creating a character, you're creating everything from scratch. You can be anything. Sort of, kind of, with some limitations, depending on the game. Other games, your mileage may vary, but you get to decide your name, your height, your weight, your age. I don't know if you can see in the upper left-hand corner, you have a class, you have a title, you have distinguishing features. And there's a couple of things over here on the side talking about strength and intelligence and wisdom. And in some games, you roll for those things. In other games, you might have a points buy system. When we look, this is earliest tabletop gaming that was out around the late 80s. This is the game it was alongside and also partially built from, which is GURPS. Oh, why can I not remember? I can never remember what it stands for. It's like a generic universal roleplay system. and it's meant to allow you to do just about anything you want. You can be in space, you can be a cowboy, you can be uh, swords and sorcery. You can go into any environment. You have a universal capacity to role play, and so it's not biome specific as far as what fantasy world you occupy. And GURPS it is generic universal roleplay system. Thank you, Wolfie. I appreciate that check. GURPS was the inspiration for the team of people who created the original Fallout system. They were all playing GURPS together. Tim Kaine, who has a YouTube channel, Kaine on Games, Cain, absolutely fabulous creator, handing out advanced degrees for free with his 10-minute videos on YouTube every single day, pretty much. The group of people who created the Fallout system wanted to computerize what they were doing in GURPS. So that's why they came up with a system. When you look at strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck, those are all things that are relating to categories on the GURPS character sheet as well. There's a strength, a dex, an IQ, health, I think. Oh, yeah, I would have to definitely double check all of those because I've never played GURPS. I have only ever heard people talk about it. But again, you can create your own name, age, weight, and how smart am I? How strong am I? Am I really, really tall and have a wiry, thin strength? Am I an old man, who's worked out in lumber yards for years and just could lift a tree trunk, but looks like he's about 100 pounds soaking wet? And so when you get to the Fallout system, you have a lot of those same things. And I remember hearing Tim Kaine say that he was one of the first advocates to pull in luck. He said luck has to be a part of this game. I mean, here we have this computer that is really bad at randomizing things, but also really good at randomizing things, which was the whole purpose to dice in any game. In any game. And that's why a lot of the earliest games became parallels for divining the will of the gods. Because randomness. So having that bit of random, I don't know what it's going to do, but it might do something good, was sort of kicking in that gambling side of humans. And then all of those skills on the right. So your attributes on the left, all of your skills on the right. The attributes are all affecting the armor class and action points and carry weight. The skills on the right, as you progress through the story, you can increase those skills. And the attributes on the left can often determine whether or not you get certain skills, and if you get those skills, how high you could actually potentially increase them. If you have a very low intelligence, you're going to have difficulty increasing your science skill beyond a certain point. But prior to computerizing all of these things, you had a lot of folks who were just doing this pencil, paper, dice, keeping things in their heads and having reference books and guides where they could go to look things up to see what would happen if. What happens if a low intelligence character wants to increase their science skill? Are they limited by the rule set or not? And I had a conversation with somebody the other day talking about how different is it to have a group of people around a table fulfilling certain roles, being guided by another player who has agreed to be an expert on the rule set, or at least the most knowledgeable person on the rule set in the group, and how different from that is old-fashioned worship community, a church or a chapel, a small village. One person has agreed that they will be studious and learn more about the rule set than anyone else, and they are willing to be an arbiter of disagreements when it comes to the rules. I feel like it's a viable parallel, because one of the other things you learn very quickly in communal role-playing games like this is what happens when there's a power imbalance. It's the first time a kid gets to be the banker in Monopoly. These are important things to learn. And why I say I can learn about 85% of your instinctive personality if you let me play a game with you. Especially if it's a game that involves a power imbalance. Critical things to know before you let somebody get too much power. And then as computer games moved forward, so I think the original Fallout, are we in the 90s? Are we like Fallout 1 release was 97. And then we start getting some other studios that want to do more. The GURPS system was connected to lots of different biomes. The D&D system, which you see here, was very much based on swords and sorcery, fantasy worlds, pre-industrial revolution. Why am I not? Divine Divinity, which was the slide I just skipped over. This right here was about 5 years after Fallout. 2002. This is from Larian Studios, and this was an attempt, thank you, Wolfie, an attempt to duplicate more of a D&D style. But now we're looking at character roles. You have a survivor, you have a warrior, you have a mage. And you have those three characters in a male presentation of self and those three characters in a female presentation of self. They come with pre-generated statistics, which was also a thing you could do in tabletop games. You could have a stack of character sheets with pre-rolled attributes or statistics and hand those out to people at the table and say, this is who we're playing. So that's what we're going to be looking at next in our How the Brain Works slideshow. But before we do that, before we look at what it means to not just create whatever character you want, and creating characters and categorizing what we're doing by narrative roles, I need to take a quick break. There we go. So if everybody is willing to hang out for just a moment, I will give you some more pretty music, and we'll come back and do part two. We're at almost an hour right now. So we'll take about 2.5 minutes so that I can stand up and stretch and fill up a nice hot mug of tea since I'm talking my brains out, literally. And yeah, then we will BRB. Hello, and welcome back from the break, everybody. If you can hear the sound of my voice, you might be watching Grandma's Games Lab. Hello, my love. Today we are not Grandma Plays a Game. We are Grandma's Games Lab, and we are talking about games, brains, and role-playing. Welcome to Grandma's Patreon project. We've been doing this for a little while now, and I have been running it out of YouTube Live instead of Twitch because I intended it to be distinct content from the rest of my Twitch content. But do you know what? I'm going to do some experimentation and we're going to run it through Twitch for a little bit because I think this is where people are used to finding me. Just not in this category. I don't think I've ever done a talk shows and podcast category before now, but welcome in. Hi there, I'm Grandma. This is my channel where I usually play games, but sometimes we talk about my passion, games, brains, and history. And today we are digging into a specific type of game, the role-play game, and how our brains enable us to role-play, why we role-play, why don't other animals do role-play? Do they? Though? Maybe? Entirely possible. We have been looking so far in the first hour of the show at specific parts of the brain that enable us to be creative, enable us to think laterally, why divergent thinking is important to creating new schemas of thought and processing the unknown material into being known material. Now, we're going to do more boring slides. Yay! But do feel free to participate in the chat. I know I did put it in followers only, so if you're out there and you're not able to chat, just click on the follow. You can unfollow after. That's fine. But I really do try to make it possible for us to keep ourselves focused on what we're doing and not have to deal with serving as bouncers for folks who are just interested in poking things with a stick. So, for us, let us poke this with a stick. I love this because as we've talked about with the different character sheets that you can use for different types of games, for video games, for tabletop roleplay games, and how much I love this, as we were just talking about GURPS inspiring Fallout, and now Fallout inspiring a Fallout system paper and pencil tabletop roleplay game. Several, as a matter of fact, but one that Jacob Buds from Arcane Arcade put a lot of love and work into that I think is very authentic to what the Fallout creators wanted out of their game. I would hope at some point that that runs across Tim Kane's purview as far as having a look and going, oh, wow, yeah. In fact, if we'd been trying to create a new tabletop game instead of a computerized role-play game, that might have been the direction we went. It's really beautiful work. And if you don't watch Arcane Arcade, they are a channel on YouTube. Go give them a watch. They play all kinds of great stuff, and it's a wonderful group of role players, rotating game master, storyteller folks, so you get different flavors of storytelling. I did not intend this to be a commercial for Arcane Arcade, but hey, a rising tide lifts all boats, and they're doing Incredible work over there. So go give them a watch. Arcane Arcade. So, as we're looking at humans being role players and what enables us to role play, why do we role play, what is the importance of role play, we're going to move away from the brain itself and how memories are stored and imagination and prefrontal cortices. We're going to look at social categorization by narrative roles. So, this is a study in the Journal of Neuroscience from 2022. All of the references are available on each of the slides so that you can find those for yourself. I will put all the links on the Patreon so you can check out the Patreon I was just checking the Patreon myself and it was like, no, I gave up. Okay. I'm not used to trying to embed Twitch over there. So usually like I say, we've been doing the YouTubes. Okay. So you will have links so that you can access these studies for yourself. This is just my distillation of information that interested me in my pursuit of this inquiry. We suggest, the authors, that social categorization by roles is fundamental to the cognitive system, relying on brain regions related to social cognition. And again, we said this is what part of the prefrontal cortex does. Where are you in the hierarchy of your belonging groups? Different groups, and you have different roles in each of those groups. We investigated social categorization by roles using narrative information. Narratives can be viewed as simulations of real-life social processes. According to the social learning theory of Bandura, 1986, characters within fictional narratives serve as models of social behavior, possibly shaping the way we understand and relate with others in actual life. Little kids who play house. You be the mommy, I'll be the daddy. And how often that type of role play interaction using some of the only social roles they're aware of. These are the creatures in my life who have power. I mean, we could say that role play originates in a bit of power fantasy, which is not a bad thing. It's a very good thing. If it is allowing you, if it is enabling you to experiment with levels of power, and if you say, okay, I'm the daddy, and instantly slap the character who's the mommy, A, we've learned a lot about your home life, and B, we've also learned that you are willing to follow that example in an abuse of power. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're the mommy, and then you can be an incredibly nurturing character, or maybe you smack the little baby character. Who knows what people are doing? All we do know about your brains is that you get things modeled for you, which is the what you know, and then you get the what you don't know, which is what would you do if you had that power. One of the most incredible questions that was being asked around the Dishonored series for a while. It's as Thane Bishop put it, it's not just what can you do when you have unlimited power, but what can you do when no one else could stop you? Okay, you're not a villain in an action hero movie. This isn't the Joker and Batman. There's no one else in this environment with the power you have. Now what? I love that sort of psychological inquiry. Okay, and our final bullet point says, moreover, regions overlapping the default mode network. You can read about it in the article. We'll put the links up. The default mode network, just sort of your instinctive, how does stuff work? How do things interact? Were found to better discriminate between roles rather than the individual characters. So there's a police lineup of people, and you know that one of the characters is a doctor, one of the characters is a librarian, one of the characters is a professional athlete, one of the characters is uh, a day laborer, a hard labor person working with their body. Um, it is easier for people to discriminate between the roles rather than knowing that's Angela, that's Tabitha, that's Shaniqua, that's Kira. Um, it's it's kind of like the game Clue or Cluedo in the UK, where you have the characters and they're given names, but the names really are the characters. So let's read that again. Moreover, regions overlapping the default mode network were found to better discriminate between roles rather than individual characters, while the OFA, which is the occipital face area of the prefrontal cortex, was found to better discriminate between individuals. These results demonstrate the inherent role of roles in person cognition and suggest an intimate relation between roles categorization and self-referential activity. And this is where a lot of gender question comes in for some people. And, well, if you have two mommies, how do you know which one is acting as the mommy? Because we have gendered that role to be presented in feminine individuals, and that is not considered in some Western culture as even possible for being a male role. Men are mommies. So the idea that when children want to play, let's play house, that children who are coming from family structures that have non-gendered roles in the home might not care. I'll play the mommy or the daddy. It doesn't matter. It's not just, oh, you're a little girl, so you must play mommy. You're a little girl, so you must be a nurse, not a doctor. And those sorts of things. And how those types of role play have a habit forming capacity in the human brain, in the very young human brain, to solidify in people's minds who's who. There was an old joke that used to go around in the late 70s, early 80s of a father and his son being involved in a car accident, and they get rushed to the hospital, and the doctor needs to perform surgery on the son. He's in critical condition. And as they go into the operating room, they say, I can't operate on this boy. He is my son. How is the doctor related to the patient? And let me tell you, in the late 70s, early 80s, that was a challenge. People would do all kinds of mental gymnastics to try to figure out how that doctor and that patient could possibly be related. And then the punchline was, it's his mother. The surgeon is his mother. Women are doctors. Continuing from that same article, in the conclusion area, at the end of the study The study has shown that the neurocognitive system intuitively classifies characters according to narrative roles. The brain network identified here to underlie social categorization by roles was found to be closely related to the DMN, the default mode network, highlighting the involvement of high-order self-referential processes in this activity. Together, these findings may help further understand the way our cognitive system classifies other people according to the roles they play and the narrative they tell, paving the way to better understand the relations between internally generated and externally perceived information. This has so much to do with acclimatizing young people to their future socialization. If they are constantly aware of media showing men are lawyers and lawyers are evil, lawyers are terrible, lawyers are liars, lawyers are manipulative, lawyers are rich guys, lawyers do bad things, it's very likely that in future socialization, all of those preconceived notions will play a part and will probably need to be undone if that individual is confronted with someone who has that role but is not that way. And how stereotypes can be stamped into a new forming mind. And again, all of that's happening between about 10 and 25, age-wise, in the average human. Your mileage may vary. Between 10 and 25 is when your brain is nailing down who does what. Because you are also looking at who do I want to be like. Right? That flexibility that you came with in babyhood and toddlerhood is starting to become more refined. I mean, frankly, you start out as being capable of being an apple tree or a pear tree. Or an orange tree. You're capable of learning any language on the planet. You're capable of imagining anything at all until you have enough experience to know what's a likely outcome. It's kind of like the plant that you put in the ground. If it's a carrot or a potato, it's going to be restricted by how soft that ground is and how it forms and what it looks like. The soil into which your brain thoughts are pushing to become a social creature will be shaped and formed by the rocks and hard soil and clay in the way. Brains are fascinating, but also why early roleplay games can be really important to create flexibility, as we saw in earlier slides. Divergent thinking, lateral thinking. Is this like this? Could this be like that? Could a woman be a surgeon? Those are important things to throw out there early on. Can two women have a loving relationship and raise a family? Can two men have a loving relationship and raise a family? Can grandparents be effective parents? Can siblings? All of these types of things that you take as norms in your society can be challenged, but they can also be reinforced by role play. What are you allowed to be? And that takes us to the last thing that we were going to talk about in the brain section. Well, I mean, what is reality anyway? Is this the real life? um, there are brain mechanisms that distinguish imagination from reality. And this is work that's being done to help people who suffer schizophrenia. But this is a question for every brain. If you've never had a dream that was so vivid, you had a hard time reminding yourself that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that didn't happen. That's not real. Or, on the other side, you know you need to have a conversation with somebody about a particular topic, but you're not sure how to do it, so you rehearse it a few times in your head, and then you're not sure if you had the conversation or not, because you've been thinking about it for a week, and now you go, wait a minute, did I talk to them? Whoa, 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 whoa. Did I talk to you about this thing or not? Did I send you a text on that? Wait a minute. I planned to. What even is reality? You have 3 pounds of electrified bacon inside a bony container operating a skeleton, nerve, and muscle flesh suit encased in skin. What is reality? The research published in Neuron found that a region in the brain known as the fusiform gyrus, located behind one's temples on the underside of the brain's temporal lobe, is involved in helping the brain to determine whether what we see is from the external world or generated by our imagination. Usually, activation in the fusiform gyrus is weaker during imagination than during perception, which helps the brain keep the two apart. However, this study showed that sometimes, when participants imagined very vividly, activation of the fusiform gyrus was very strong, and participants confused their imagination for reality. So, this is my note because I wanted to say specifically what the test was testing. Participants were asked to look for a specific faint pattern within a noisy background on a screen. So you imagine one of those, off the air snow patterns that we used to have back in the days when televisions and computers weren't on 24/7. A real pattern was only presented half the time, but the participants were asked to look for the pattern. A faint pattern on a very noisy screen. And then to say, is the pattern there or not? Professor Fleming said these areas of the prefrontal cortex have previously been implicated in metacognition, the ability to think about our own minds. Our results indicate that the same brain areas are also involved in deciding what is real. Have you ever been around a role-play table on an adventure? Things are in crisis. Nerves, hormones, adrenaline, pumping. One of the characters is getting close to death. Somebody has to get there and save them. Or at least stop whatever's attacking them from doing it. The more vivid that experience is for you, the more socially connected you are to the people at the table. the more connected that is to the smell of that same sweat that would be happening if you were out doing this in real life. Because as we learned earlier, smells and memory. Hippocampus and amygdala dancing together. Suddenly success. Everybody cheers. The bad guy is down. The teammate is rezzed. We win. It really happened. You really played a character who succeeded. Is it real? I mean, it's more real than a dream. In the dream, you weren't guiding any of the activity. Brains that think about brains. Brains that think about how brains think. The inability of some brains to distinguish fantasy from reality. But I saw it on TV. No, I saw it on TV. XYZ city that I've never been to and is 1,000 miles away from where I live. It's on fire. I saw footage of firefighters putting out fires. That's real. Our brains are amazing. And they're terrifying. Because I think the more we move through our modern world, the more dangerous it can be to confuse what we don't experience for experience. I'll fix that in just a moment. Come here. I like that one. We'll leave it on that for a second while I look up this other thing that I want to show off, which is this right here. So, one of the reasons this game has me so fascinated is because I have been used to playing games where you get to choose who you are, what's your name, what do you do, and all kinds of stuff like that. But this is a game called Blood on the Clock Tower. The fascinating thing about Blood on the Clock Tower is that this is a game you play where you are assigned a role. You get together just like you do with other tabletop roleplay games, but there is a script that is curated that contains, it's a power balanced curation, sometimes horribly unbalanced on purpose for gameplay excitement, but generally it is a balanced roleplay that allows people to play a role. You don't necessarily play a character. The character is the role is the character. You are the player. And can I increase our size here? Okay, you should be able to see that better now. This is a game from the Pandemonium Institute, and it's quite brilliant. If you haven't seen anything about the game, there's 100 different YouTube channels right now playing it. It's become very popular. In fact, Ben Burns, who's been one of the storytellers, is out on a cruise right now. That is a Blood on the Clock Tower cruise. This is a game that is not, we sat down and played for 8 hours. I mean, you can. Each session of the game is usually going to be 2 hours or less. And then you just play multiple sessions. 1 chair per player, and this is how to do it in real life. It's online. They have an app, the Blood on the Clock Tower app. You can find it here. This is Blood on the Clock Tower wiki. And I can get the link for you. Did we put it there? No, we put it in the Patreon. All right, there you go. So, the grimoire is the script. That's the balanced. You have so many townsfolk, you have so many demons and minions. And then there's another option for including outsiders, who are people who do not live in the town but are not demons or minions. Okay, there's a rules explanation. You're going to tell everybody how everything goes. The character tokens are distributed. They should be randomized. It's generally considered bad form for a storyteller to curate the roles to the players over much. And add, remove characters, pass out. This is how to do it in person. Right. So when you look at different characters that people can roll, this is the basic script, Trouble Brewing. In Trouble Brewing, you have a certain amount of characters. There are different types of characters. Some characters passively receive information. Some characters need to take action to learn who does what. Some simply want to, because of an activity connected to their role, want to try to make themselves look tasty for the evil characters. And what you have is a combat between good and evil. The townsfolk are good, the demons and minions are evil. The outsiders are neutral, but they are considered good characters. So you have a classic conflict of good and evil. During the day, the townsfolk and the demons and minions pretending to be townsfolk or outsiders all talk to each other, exchange information, tell what they may know based on what their character is allowed to do or capable of doing. And sometimes they're just lying to each other because they don't want to be found out. And then during the night phase, the coin flips and the evil characters get to act. Other characters might receive information. You might be a character who gets a once a game bit of information. You might be a character who gets information every night phase. You might be a character who has to go to the storyteller during the day phase and ask for information. But again, you might be a once a game, you might be ongoing info. So there are rules for each character, and you can kind of see over here on the right. Here, these are the townsfolk you could choose from. It's very fun. They each have different abilities. It's taken me a couple of months to really sort of get my sea legs on who's allowed to do what and what can you expect from these roles? Because as we were noticing in our slides, what you can expect from these roles can really unmask someone trying to bluff and pretend they're something they're not in order to get away with killing more townsfolk in the night phase. Your outsiders, your poisoners, outsiders don't necessarily help the good team or the evil team. I'm still trying to get a good definition of a working definition for me of how I describe them. The minions, these are all the helpers for the demons, and then you only have one type of demon in this script or classification of scripts called Trouble Brewing. Good players are going to need to figure out who's good and who's evil by using logic and intuition. Some players may want to reveal their character and share their information immediately. Others may want to lie about their identity so that they don't get attacked. If I'm getting really good information every night in the game, I don't want to lose that opportunity. Maybe if I'm just a once again information role, that would be fun. But if I'm set up to get information every night, I want as many nights as I can get, because that will help me to refine what's going on with everybody else in the game. Evil players need to pretend to be good characters. And they're going to give out false information, and they also sometimes have abilities that force the characters to not receive accurate information. But you don't have a character sheet. You don't have skills and attributes. It's all about you and what you bring to the game at the table in the conversation. And I strongly recommend that you take some time and go watch some gameplay on YouTube of Blood on the Clock Tower, because I am utterly fascinated by it. I cannot consume enough Blood on the Clock Tower content. Mostly because it doesn't require anything. You don't roll a die to see what you get. There really isn't a randomization. And there are some incredible role options as far as role playing that might allow the game to only be 5 minutes. If somebody makes a correct guess using their ability in the first 5 minutes of the game, game's over. Okay, re-roll. They call it re-rack. Try again. You put all the tokens back in the bag, send them back out to different players, hopefully, and everybody takes on a different role and plays again. So you imagine taking the characters from a theater play. All right, we're just going to assign everybody one of these characters. Off we go. Very much how I see the original Greek theater. I mean, I'm sure you had some people who, like today, became stars for the audience. And everybody wanted that person, that actor to play Odysseus. The other reason I like the Blood on the Clock Tower format is because you're not stuck. If you realize along the way that maybe you made some errors in creating your roleplay character, and now they've sort of slid over into a region that, it's I don't really want to play that. It's not fun. It was fun when I started. I just didn't realize that having to do that every week when we got together was going to start becoming that tedious. At least in a game like Blood on the Clock Tower that's only going to be an hour to 2 hours, you know that the next time you roll up, you're going to be but hopefully something different. The chances aren't good that that's the big randomization, is what character role are you going to be playing. But the ability to have a role play game, and therapeutically, what it's able to do for someone who maybe doesn't have an easy time standing up for themselves, to be encouraged to play a character who is very confident, and to create an environment that supports that confidence. That type of role play can have an incredible impact therapeutically for someone who struggles with what are considered everyday skills for many other people. But presentation of certain roles through media, constant drumbeats of these roles only do this, these roles only do that. There's no way to know how the surgeon is related to the patient because women aren't surgeons. There is a very negative effect that can happen, and a conditioning effect that can be deliberately put forward by bad actors to constantly drumbeat. And if you don't see this, I challenge you to keep your eye out for it. If you go to different social media, how often is the person being made fun of? Oh my gosh, the person who didn't know how to do the thing was my teacher, my mom, my girlfriend, right? There tends to be a very pervasive drumbeat that, oh, why did these kids today don't even know how to change a tire? I don't know. Did you ever try to teach them to change a tire? It's really difficult to know things you haven't been taught. That there are stereotypes and perceptions that can be manipulated in a social media environment that don't represent reality. And that's why it's so important on that last slide to understand how thin the veil is between what's real and what's not. And how your ability to form memories in your hippocampus can be dramatically affected by environmental cues that confuse reality and imagination. And how for many people with video games and video gaming experiences, people are pursuing experiences that are closer and closer and closer to an immersed experience, virtual reality, those types of things. And why we have to, as a society, as a culture, as a species, I think, that wants to continue to survive, that we have to pay attention to how those tools are being used. And as we've said in just about every single episode up until now, games are tools. This is a toolkit that you can use to do things. And what you do with the tools is what makes them good or bad. And if you decide to take that screwdriver out of the toolbox and stab somebody in the neck with it, that you can use tools to do that. You can use tools to cause harm. You sure can. And why it's important to not just leave the toolbox out and say, oh, here, kid, here's a game. Oh, here, traumatized young man or young woman in this age of brain formation and socialization. here's a game for you to play without any awareness or curation of how that game will affect them or could affect them. So do I think there needs to be a law? No, I think there needs to be a more aware population. We're aware of a whole lot of things that don't matter, to be fair. Whether or not there's a tree growing on an uninhabited island in the Andaman Sea doesn't really matter. And that sometimes we need to look at the things that are in front of us and decide how we're going to curate our informational appetite in order to be more beneficial to our communities and our societies and our cultures, is the legacy that we're going to have. That's going to be your legacy. And I want you to have a deliberate one. So, games, brains, and role playing. We'll talk about all different kinds of role playing games and hopefully be able to demonstrate some as we head forward. I want to be able to do an episode next Saturday, but I'm not interested in making any promises at all about that. So we're just going to call this episode complete for today. Please look at different role playing, how role playing might be beneficial for you, and play more games. Join me next time on Grandma's Games Lab. We're going to do more about role playing. Maybe we'll do some different role playing in some games that I have. All right. Thanks for joining me. Please do something kind for yourself, and I will see you when I see you.